My son said, "I have a surprise for you," and handed me an envelope with a $900,000 debt. In that instant, the world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My chest tightened, and the room spun as though I had suddenly stepped into a nightmare I never asked for. I remembered the hopeful smile on his face, the strange nervous twitch of his lips, and the way his wife sat beside him with her chin held too high, her eyes glittering like she had already won something. They looked at me as if I should be grateful for whatever was inside that envelope, but when I unfolded those papers and saw the numbers staring back at me, all I felt was betrayal colder than ice. 3 weeks earlier, my life had been entirely different. I was standing in a little convenience store downtown, holding a lottery ticket in my trembling hands, and the clerk confirmed that I had just become $2 million richer. $2 million. I was 67 years old, a retired third-grade teacher who had spent decades stretching every paycheck, patching clothes instead of buying new ones, and ignoring the faint pull in my chest whenever I dreamed of traveling or living without worry. And suddenly, just like that, my entire life shifted. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, "Thank you, God," over and over again. The very first thing I did was call my son, Daniel, my only child. My voice shook so hard I could barely explain it, but when I said the words, "I won, Danny," I really won. 2 million inch, he shouted so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Mom, that's incredible." I heard his wife, Claire, squealing in the background, her high-pitched voice filled with excitement. "We have to celebrate this properly," Daniel insisted. "Don't worry about anything. Let us plan something special for you." For a moment, my heart softened. I thought maybe this was the miracle I had been waiting for, not the money, but the chance for my family to feel close again. The truth was, things hadn't been warm between us for years. Ever since Claire came into the picture, our relationship had slowly drifted, like a boat pushed further and further from shore. She had strong opinions about everything, from the curtains in my living room to the way I cooked stew, and no matter what I did, it seemed I was always somehow falling short. But when Daniel's voice cracked with genuine excitement, I wanted to believe this money could heal the distance. The days that followed were filled with joy I hadn't felt in years. I met with financial advisors, carefully laying out plans to secure my future. I was never reckless, not even with this sudden wealth. I decided I would pay off my mortgage, set aside savings for retirement, and maybe, just maybe, take that trip to Ireland I'd been dreaming about since I was a girl. I wanted to walk the cobblestone streets of Dublin, see the cliffs with my own eyes, and breathe the air of a place I had only read about in books. The rest I planned to keep safe, growing slowly, giving me peace I'd never known before. Daniel called almost every day during those 2 weeks. At first, I thought it was simply love, his way of checking on me, making sure I wasn't overwhelmed by the sudden change. "Mom, how are you holding up? Are you getting good advice? Claire thinks you should talk to her financial planner. He's amazing." His voice was tender, but every time he mentioned Claire's involvement, I felt a shiver in my chest. Claire worked in marketing for a luxury hotel chain, always chasing shiny things, designer clothes, expensive handbags, the newest phone. Her taste always seemed to be one step ahead of their budget. I pushed the unease away. I wanted so badly to trust him, to believe this was just his son being protective. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I told him. "The bank connected me with someone very reputable. We're keeping things conservative." "Conservative is fine," he said, but I caught a flicker of disappointment. "Just remember you've got family who loves you. If you ever want to do something generous, we'd never say no." That should have been the first red flag, but love makes you blind. And I was just so happy to feel wanted. When Daniel insisted on throwing a dinner to celebrate, I felt giddy like a schoolgirl. He said he and Claire would handle everything. The food, the decorations, the drinks. "It's your celebration, Mom. You shouldn't lift a finger." Claire even offered to do the cooking, which shocked me. She had always acted like being in the kitchen was beneath her. For once, it felt like they were going out of their way to show me love. I spent that Friday evening cleaning my house, though it was already spotless. I polished the silverware, wiped down every surface twice, and pulled out my mother's china, the good set I only used for holidays. The next morning, I treated myself to the salon. I hadn't done that in years. The stylist curled my silver hair into soft waves, and I sat there looking in the mirror, hardly believing the woman staring back was me. On my way home, I bought a new dress, navy with tiny white flowers. It was the most expensive thing I had purchased for myself in decades, but I wanted to look like a woman who deserved celebration. By the time the evening came, candles flickered on the table, my grandmother's pearl earrings gleamed on my ears, and I felt elegant in a way I had not in years. I stood by the door, heart racing, waiting for my son. When the bell rang, Daniel walked in with his arms full of grocery bags and a bouquet of roses. Claire followed behind, holding a sleek leather briefcase that looked oddly out of place for a family dinner. Happy Celebration Day, Mom. Daniel kissed my cheek, and Claire, shockingly, gave me a quick hug. These are for you, she said, holding the flowers. I forced a smile. For the first time in years, she had addressed me kindly. You shouldn't have gone to so much trouble, I murmured, inhaling the sweet scent of roses. Nothing's too good for our lottery winner, Claire replied smoothly, her eyes gleaming in a way that made my stomach twist. I wanted to brush it off, but something in her tone unsettled me. She was dressed more formally than usual, in a crisp blouse and dark slacks, as though she had just come from an office meeting instead of preparing to celebrate with family. That briefcase, it tugged at my thoughts, whispering a warning I didn't yet understand. Still, I pushed those feelings away. Tonight, I told myself, would be about joy, not suspicion. After all, hadn't I earned that? The dinner felt almost too perfect, like something out of a magazine. Daniel had ordered food from one of the most expensive French restaurants in the city. The rich smell of butter, garlic, and wine filled my little dining room, mixing with the glow of the candles. Claire, for once, wasn't criticizing my curtains or making side comments about how small the house was. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine, and said something that nearly made me drop my fork. You know, Evelyn, she began, using my first name for the first time ever. This house has such charm. Very authentic. I blinked at her. She had never called me by my name before. Always your mom, when she spoke to Daniel, rarely even acknowledging me directly. And now, suddenly, she was complimenting my home. Her smile was polite, too polite, her voice smooth like she had rehearsed the line. I forced a small smile back. Thank you, I said softly. This house, it holds my whole life. I've always loved it. Daniel raised his glass. To Mom, he said warmly, and to family taking care of each other. His eyes lingered on mine in a way that felt strange, almost heavy with meaning. To family, Claire echoed, her glass clinking gently against mine. I swallowed the expensive wine, velvety and far richer than anything I'd ever bought for myself. It slid down my throat, but the taste left me uneasy, like it carried something I couldn't quite name. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine we were truly close again. I told them stories, how the bank clerks had stared in shock when I came in with the winning ticket, how the teller had nervously asked for a manager before handing me the paperwork. Daniel laughed in all the right places, nodding with interest. Claire even chuckled when I admitted I had accidentally dropped the ticket on the floor in my panic, nearly giving myself a heart attack. But underneath their smiles, I sensed something else. I couldn't explain it at first, just little things. The way Daniel's hand tightened around his glass when I mentioned being conservative with my investments. The way Claire's eyes darted toward that leather briefcase she had set carefully by her chair, as if she were waiting for the right moment to bring it into play. The food was delicious, but I could hardly taste it. My chest grew tight with every passing minute, as if some invisible clock was ticking toward a moment I couldn't avoid. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. He set his fork down and leaned closer, his tone soft but weighted. Mom, there's something we need to talk about tonight, he said. Something important. It's about family helping family. The word struck me like a sudden draft of cold air. My pulse quickened. This, I realized, was the real reason for the fancy dinner, the sudden warmth, the unexpected kindness. They wanted something. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. What kind of help? Claire smiled sweetly, almost too sweetly, and reached for the briefcase. With a little click, she opened it and slid a thick folder across the table toward me. Her manicured nails tapped the edge of the papers like she was presenting me with a gift. Just look at this, Evelyn. It will explain everything. Even upside down, the bold numbers leapt off the page. Rows and rows of figures, all leading to a total that made my stomach lurch. 900,000. Almost a million. My hand trembled as I pulled the folder closer, flipping through pages filled with legal headers and collection notices. What is this? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Daniel's face tightened. Claire's been under some financial pressure. Nothing too serious, just things that got out of hand. Temporary. Temporary. My voice cracked. This says you owe nearly $1 million. I stared at Claire, her eyes sharp and unflinching. How is that even possible? It's called investment, she said coolly, her smile slipping for just a moment. Building a future requires risk. Investment. I flipped another page. Luxury hotels, designer clothing, a car lease more expensive than any car I'd ever owned. My throat burned as I looked up at her. This is an investment, Claire. This is indulgence. The room went quiet except for the faint crackle of the candles. My heart hammered, so hard I could hear it in my ears. Daniel reached across the table and placed his hand on mine. Mom, you just won $2 million. You can help her get back on her feet. It won't ruin you. Family helps family. Those words. I had used them with him countless times while raising him. Family helps family. I had said it when I worked extra shifts to buy his school books, when I skipped meals so he could eat more. And now, here he was, using those same words as a weapon against me. Daniel, I said slowly, my voice trembling, this is almost half of everything I have after taxes. Half? You don't really need it all, Claire interrupted, her tone dripping with false sweetness. You're 67. Your house is paid off. You live simply. What do you even need $2 million for? The audacity left me breathless. What did I need it for? For once in my life, I wanted security. I wanted peace. I wanted to travel, to live, to finally stop worrying about every dollar. But to them, my dreams meant nothing. To them, I was just a vault waiting to be emptied. I set the papers down carefully, my hands shaking, and looked from my son to his wife. For the first time that evening, I truly saw them, not as the people I wanted them to be, but as the people they were becoming. And my heart broke a little as I realized they weren't celebrating me at all. They were circling me, like predators waiting for the kill. The folder sat heavy on the table, its edges cutting into my vision like a blade. I stared at the numbers again, though they blurred through the sting of my eyes. 900,000. It wasn't just a figure. It was my entire peace of mind hanging in the balance. Daniel, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, this is impossible. How could you let this happen? How could you stand by and watch her sink this deep? His face reddened, his lips pressing tight. He didn't answer right away, just rubbed his palms together like a guilty child. I tried, Mom. I did. But Claire kept saying she had it under control. She always promised she'd fix it. Claire's eyes flashed at him, a warning look sharp enough to cut glass. Don't put this on me, she snapped before smoothing her tone again. Evelyn, you have to understand. In my industry, appearances matter. I had to keep up a certain image, clothes, dinners, cars. It wasn't vanity, it was strategy. I laughed, though it sounded hollow and cracked. Strategy? You call a $23,000 purse strategy. You call luxury hotels and spa treatment strategy. Claire, I survived on less than $30,000 a year for the last decade. You call that survival? What exactly do you call this? She leaned forward, her manicured hand resting casually against her cheek, her smile too calm. I call it building a future. And now, with your win, you can help us reset. We're family. This is what family does. My heart clenched at the word, family. For me, family had meant sacrifice, sleepless nights, and endless prayers that Daniel would have more than I did. For her, it meant entitlement. And what if I say no? I whispered, though part of me already feared the answer. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, glancing between me and Claire, like he was caught between loyalty and desperation. Claire, on the other hand, leaned back and let out a soft, cold laugh. Well, she said smoothly, I suppose that would tell us what kind of person you really are. My stomach twisted. What kind of person I am? Yes, she said, tilting her head like a predator circling its prey. The kind who wins the lottery and suddenly thinks she's better than the family who's been there all along. I turned to Daniel, my son, my baby, the child I had raised through scraped knees and heartbreaks, the boy I once held against my chest during thunderstorms. Supported me? My voice cracked. Daniel, when have you supported me? When have you given me anything that wasn't wrapped in conditions or convenience? His face flushed deeper. Mom, don't twist this. We include you in holidays. We call you, we keep you in our lives. That's support. The words sliced me open in ways I hadn't expected. He was listing crumbs, scraps of attention, as though I should bow in gratitude for them. And worse, I saw the truth in Claire's smug little smirk. She was the one pulling the strings, feeding him these lines, twisting his sense of duty into something unrecognizable. I wanted to scream. Instead, I breathed deeply, steadying myself the way I had done for 30 years in a classroom full of unruly children. And this, I said softly, tapping the papers with a trembling finger, this is what you call love, demanding almost half of everything I've worked and prayed for, holding my own son's affection hostage unless I pay the price. Daniel's jaw tightened, and for the first time I saw something flicker in his eyes, shame, maybe, or regret, but buried under fear. Fear of losing Claire. Fear of losing his life with her. Claire didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her voice low and smooth, like poison laced with honey. Evelyn, you're old. You don't need that kind of money. You've had your life. You should be thinking about us, about Daniel's future, about the children we'll have one day. Why hoard money you'll never live long enough to spend? The words struck harder than any slap. Old. Disposable. As though the years I had left didn't matter. As though my dreams of Ireland, of peace, of security, were worthless compared to her designer handbags. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. My hands were trembling not from fear, but from a cold clarity washing over me. I saw them now, not as family, not as people who loved me, but as predators, smiling, rehearsed predators who had dressed up manipulation as love. And as much as it broke me, I realized then I was prey only if I chose to be. I stood near the window, staring out at the little garden I had tended for years. The roses I planted with my own hands swayed gently in the evening air, untouched by the storm raging inside my dining room. Just hours earlier, I had imagined this night would be filled with laughter, warmth, maybe even healing. Instead, I was standing in my own house, cornered by my son and his wife, treated like nothing more than a bank. Behind me, their voices continued, smooth but pressing. Mom, Daniel said carefully, his tone soft like he was trying to tame me. You have to understand. Time matters here. Some of these debts, creditors are threatening legal action. If we don't act soon, Claire could lose everything. And you know what that would mean for me, too. I turned slowly. What do you mean? He shifted, avoiding my eyes. My job. If Claire files for bankruptcy, it could affect my clearance. The government doesn't like financial instability. It could cost me my career. And there it was the hook. It wasn't just about Claire's mess anymore. They were tying Daniel's future to my money, forcing me to feel responsible for his life unraveling. My stomach dropped. Daniel, I said softly, why didn't you come to me months ago when this started? Why now? Why only after I won? His lips parted, but no sound came out. His silence said more than words ever could. They hadn't told me because I was useless to them before. I only mattered now that I had money. Claire broke the silence, leaning forward, her voice sharp with impatience. It's fate, Evelyn. You won at the exact time we needed you most. Don't you see? This was meant to happen. Fate. I repeated, a bitter laugh slipping out. Years of me pinching pennies, working myself to exhaustion, and you call it fate that I should hand my winnings over to you? Her mask cracked for just a second. I saw the steel underneath her painted smile. If you don't help us, the consequences will fall on Daniel. Is that what you want? To watch your only son lose everything because you couldn't part with money you don't even need. Daniel flinched at her words, but he didn't stop her. That hurt more than anything. I walked back to the table, my legs heavy, and sank into my chair. I looked at my son. His hands were folded, his eyes pleading, but his mouth stayed closed. And I realized, maybe for the first time, how much Claire had molded him. How much she had taught him to believe that love came with conditions. Daniel, I whispered, my voice breaking, do you only call me because she reminds you? He froze, his face flushed red, his mouth opening and closing like he was drowning. Finally, he muttered, it's not that simple, Mom. I'm busy. Life is busy. Claire, she helps me remember to keep in touch. His words cut deeper than any blade. I wasn't even his mother anymore. I was a chore on his to-do list, a duty managed by his wife. I see, I said softly, folding my hands in my lap to hide the trembling. So, the holidays, the phone calls, the invitations, it was never about me. It was charity. And now you want me to pay you back for it. Stop being so dramatic, Claire snapped, her sweetness gone, her voice sharp like broken glass. This isn't charity. This is family. You have the money, we have the need. That's balance. That's how it works. I stared at her, at the woman who had taken my son further from me than I ever thought possible, and I felt something inside me harden. You want balance? I said quietly. Here's some balance. After taxes, I'll have about 1.3 million left. You're asking for 900,000. That leaves me with less than 500,000 to last me the rest of my life. Is that what you call balance? Daniel leaned forward, desperation flickering across his face. Mom, you could live comfortably on that. The interest alone would keep you afloat. You'd never go hungry. You'd be fine. Please, just help us this once. Fine. That word echoed inside my skull like a curse. Fine wasn't the life I had dreamed of when I held that winning ticket. Fine wasn't peace or security. Fine was settling for scraps after a lifetime of sacrifice. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't recognize him. He wasn't the little boy who used to beg me to stay up and read one more bedtime story. He wasn't the young man I'd cried over when he left for college. He was a stranger, sitting in my house, trying to strip away the one chance I had to finally live without fear. And Claire, she wasn't even pretending anymore. Her eyes were sharp, her body tense, her voice cutting. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just write the check. Do the right thing. The right thing. My throat tightened as I looked between them. For years, I had been desperate for their approval, swallowing their little jabs, smiling through the distance, pretending crumbs were enough. But now, as they sat there, waiting like vultures, I understood something with chilling clarity. They weren't here to celebrate me. They weren't here because they loved me. They were here to take everything. The silence between us grew heavy, pressing down on my chest like a weight I couldn't shake off. My hands rested on the table, but my fingers dug into the edge of the wood, leaving little crescents in the polish. I could hear the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, each second dragging me deeper into this twisted reality. Claire leaned forward, her elbows brushing the edge of my mother's china plates, the very ones I had taken out tonight in the hope of creating memories. Evelyn, she said slowly, her voice laced with sugar that didn't hide the venom underneath. If you refuse this, what does that say about you? About the kind of mother you are. Her words cut deep. Not because I believed them, but because I saw the way Daniel's shoulders stiffened, as if he thought there might be truth in them. My son, the boy I had carried, fed, protected, sitting here, letting his wife question my love. What it says, I replied, my voice low but trembling, is that I raised a son who now thinks love has a price tag. Daniel flinched, his face reddening. That's not fair, Mom. You're twisting everything. Am I? My voice grew stronger, steadier, like a flame catching hold. You invite me here under the pretense of celebration. You shower me with food and compliments, and then you hand me nearly $1 million in debt. Tell me, Daniel, how is that not manipulation? He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. It's not manipulation. It's family asking for help when they're drowning. Drowning? My laugh cracked like dry wood. Drowning is when you can't pay rent. Drowning is when you don't know how to put food on the table. This, I jabbed a finger at the stack of papers, the endless pages of debt. This is greed. This is living far beyond your means and expecting me to pay the price. Claire's composure finally snapped. Her voice rose sharp and loud, echoing in my small dining room. You think this is greed? Do you have any idea what it takes to succeed in this world? People judge you by what you wear, what you drive, where you eat. That purse, that car, those hotels, they weren't luxuries, they were investments in my future. I was building something. Building what? I shot back, my voice rising too. A palace made of sand? You've already lost your job, Claire. Tell me, what exactly did all of this buy you? Because from where I'm sitting, it bought you nothing but debt and desperation. Daniel lifted his hands like he was trying to calm us both. Please stop. This isn't helping. Mom, we're just asking you to step in this once, to keep things from falling apart. And what happens the next time? I whispered. Because there will be a next time, Daniel. If she spent this much already, do you really believe it stops here? His face crumpled, the denial in his eyes warring with the truth he couldn't admit. I pushed the folder away, the papers sliding across the polished wood with a soft hiss. No, I said finally, my voice shaking but firm. I won't do it. I won't give up my future so you can erase your mistakes. Claire's face twisted with fury. She slammed her glass down so hard wine splashed across the tablecloth. You selfish old woman. Do you even hear yourself? You'd rather sit alone in this house with your little bank account than help your only family? What kind of mother are you? The words hit like a blow to the gut, but I refused to let her see me falter. Slowly I stood, napkin falling from my lap to the floor. I wiped my damp palms against my dress, feeling the fabric cling where sweat had gathered. My voice came out calm, almost eerily so. You want to know what kind of mother I am? I'm the kind who worked herself to the bone so her son could have a chance at a better life. I'm the kind who went without so he never had to. And I'll be damned if I let that sacrifice be reduced to a check that wipes away your shopping sprees. Daniel's mouth opened, but before he could speak, Claire exploded. She grabbed her martini glass, still half full, and with one swift flick of her wrist, she hurled it straight into my face. The cold liquid splashed against my skin, stinging my eyes, dripping down into the neckline of my new dress. Olive brine clung to my hair, the sharp tang of vodka burning my nostrils. For a heartbeat, the world froze. The candles flickered. The clock ticked. My son gasped. And then something inside me broke. No, not broke. Snapped. I slowly dabbed at my face with my napkin. My eyes locked on Claire's, never blinking, never wavering. My hand shook not with fear, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. You think I'm selfish? I said, my voice low and deadly calm. You haven't seen selfish yet. The air in the room thickened, heavy with a silence so sharp it cut through the space between us. For the first time that night, both Daniel and Claire leaned back in their chairs, as if they finally realized they had pushed me too far. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel desperate for their love. I felt powerful. Daniel's fork clattered against the plate as he tried to speak, but his words stumbled out like a child caught lying. Mom, you don't mean that. You're upset. You don't really want to turn your back on us. We're family. Family. I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. I walked slowly to the sideboard where the candles flickered, dragging my fingers across the polished wood to steady myself. Do you even understand what family means? Family doesn't come with an invoice. Family doesn't hand you a stack of debt and call it love. Family doesn't throw a drink in your face when you say no. Claire rolled her eyes, her composure cracking again. Oh, stop with the dramatics. It was just a drink. You act like I assaulted you. I turned back to her, my eyes burning. You did assault me. In my own home. And you did it because I wouldn't hand over nearly $1 million to erase your bad choices. What would you call that? The question hung in the air, and for once, Claire had no answer. She looked away, her jaw tight, her fingers tapping furiously against the table. Daniel reached out, desperation in his eyes. Please, Mom, don't make this harder. You could solve everything. With one check, it all goes away. Claire can start fresh. My job is safe. We can all move forward. Why won't you help us? I stared at him, at the boy I had once rocked to sleep during thunderstorms, the boy who used to cling to my hand when crossing the street. And I realized that somewhere along the way, that boy had been replaced by a man who saw me only as a solution, not as a mother. Because it's not my problem to solve, I said quietly. His face hardened, his voice rising. Then what kind of mother are you? The words pierced me, sharp and cruel. But instead of breaking me, they made something inside me crystallize. I stood taller, straighter, and my voice came out steady. I'm the kind of mother who finally learned that love doesn't mean being used. I'm the kind of mother who won't bankrupt herself so you can keep living a lie. If that makes me selfish, then so be it. Claire laughed, then a harsh, mocking sound. You'll regret this, Evelyn. You'll regret it when you're sitting here all alone with your money and no one to share it with. I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was sharp, cold, the kind of smile that made even Claire falter. Maybe I will, but I'd rather sit alone with peace than surrounded by people who see me as a bank account. The words landed like stones, and I saw Daniel's face crumble. His eyes filled with something like guilt. But still, he didn't defend me. He didn't tell his wife to stop. He didn't stand by me. That was when I knew. The son I had raised was gone, at least for now, buried beneath fear, pride, and Claire's poisonous influence. I returned to the table and pulled open my checkbook. Their eyes lit up, hope flashing across their faces. They thought I had caved. Instead, I wrote a check for $1,000, ripped it neatly, and slid it across the table. This is what I can give. A gift, not a loan. Use it however you want. Claire stared at the check like it was filth. 1,000? Do you think this is funny? Daniel's face darkened. Mom, please, don't insult us. It's not an insult, I said calmly. It's help within my limits. You want nearly $1 million? Then you have bigger problems than I can solve. The room went silent. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock, each second marking the death of something between us. Claire's hand trembled as she shoved the check back across the table. Keep it. You'll need it more than we do when you're rotting alone in this house. I picked up the check, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my pocket. Maybe I will, I said softly, but at least I'll know my choices were my own. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt free. The smell of vodka clung to me, sharp and sour, dripping into the delicate fabric of my new dress. The dress I had bought for this one night, for the celebration that was never really about me. My skin burned where the alcohol touched it, but my heart had gone completely cold. I lowered the napkin from my face and looked directly at Claire. Her chest was heaving, her cheeks flushed, but there was no remorse in her eyes. Only defiance. She had wanted to humiliate me, to show her power in my own house. Sit down, I said. My voice was calm, steady, the kind of tone that once silenced 30 restless children in a noisy classroom. Daniel blinked, startled. Claire's lips curled, but something in the way I spoke must have unsettled her. She sank back into her chair slowly, folding her arms across her chest. Daniel followed, slumping like a boy caught misbehaving. For the first time that night, they looked less like predators and more like scolded children. I reached for the folder again and flipped the pages with deliberate slowness. Let's talk about selfishness, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Nordstrom, $47,000. Louis Vuitton, $23,000. Four Seasons Resort, $8,000. A BMW lease for $1,200 a month. Should I keep going? Claire's jaw tightened, but she lifted her chin defiantly. Those were necessary expenses. Necessary, I repeated, my laugh sharp and humorless. I lived on less than $30,000 a year for a decade, Claire. Tell me, what part of a $23,000 handbag is necessary? You wouldn't understand, she shot back. My job required a certain image. In hospitality, appearances matter. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Your job that you lost 3 months ago? That job. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Claire. She looked away. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I thought you loved that job, I said, my voice soft but firm. What happened? Finally, Daniel spoke. There was a reorganization. Her position was eliminated. It wasn't her fault. When? I asked. 3 months ago, Claire admitted, her voice small, her bravado slipping for just a moment. My stomach dropped, not with sympathy, but with realization. 3 months. They had known about this for months, known about the debt, the job loss, the crisis, and not once had they called me, not once had they asked for advice, support, even comfort. They had waited until I won the lottery. So you've been hiding this all along, I said slowly, my hands pressing flat against the table. And only now, when I have money, you decide to tell me. Tell me, Claire. If I hadn't won, what was your plan then? Bankruptcy, she said bluntly, her mask slipping entirely, which would have destroyed my credit for years, and probably ruined Daniel's clearance at work. Daniel looked down, shame flickering in his eyes. So, I said, leaning back in my chair, you've made reckless choices for years. You've lied. You've hidden. And now you expect me to fix it. And if I say no, you make me the villain. Claire's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as glass. If you say no, Evelyn, then you're choosing money over family. That was the final strike. My breath caught, but not from pain, this time from something fiercer. I felt the words sink deep into me, ignite something that had been buried for years. I stood slowly, my wet dress clinging to my skin, and looked at them both. Daniel's face was pale, conflicted, and Claire's was burning with anger. My hands no longer trembled. No, I said quietly, my voice steady. I'm choosing myself. For once in my life, I am choosing me. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire stared at me as if I had spoken blasphemy. Daniel's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time in years, I felt the power shift. Not to them, not to the money, but to me. And I wasn't about to give it back. The room felt heavier than stone, the candlelight flickering against their faces like shadows of people I no longer recognized. Daniel's shoulders slumped forward, his hand pressed against his forehead, while Claire sat rigid, her eyes narrowed into slits that could have cut glass. I reached for my glass of water, not wine, and sipped slowly. The coolness steadied me. For years, I had been the one sitting at tables, shrinking into myself, afraid to upset anyone, desperate to keep peace. But tonight I felt a strange calm, like the eye of a storm. Mom, Daniel said finally, his voice strained, you're making a mistake. You think keeping that money will make you happy? It won't. Money doesn't love you. We do. I set the glass down and looked at him, my son, the man who now sounded like a stranger. Love doesn't throw conditions at me, Daniel. Love doesn't hand me an ultimatum. If this is your version of love, then I don't need it. His lips parted, but no words came. Claire, however, leaned forward, her voice cutting and sharp. You're blinded by pride. Do you really think anyone will be here for you when you get old and sick? Do you think your little garden will take care of you? Because it won't. We are your family. We are all you have. I met her stare, steady and unflinching. No, Claire. What I have is dignity. And that's something you'll never understand. Her face flushed deep red. Dignity won't hold your hand in a hospital bed. Dignity won't call you on your birthday. Dignity won't keep you company on Christmas morning. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor, the sound sharp as a blade. And yet, neither will you. Not unless I pay for it. I'd rather be alone with dignity than with people who see me as nothing more than a wallet. Daniel's face crumpled. Mom, please, he whispered, his voice breaking. Don't do this. Don't shut us out. Just think of it as an investment in me, in us. An investment, I repeated softly, shaking my head. I invested everything in you already, Daniel. My youth, my health, my dreams. And do you know what that return has been? Nights spent alone, phone calls that never came, holidays where I waited by the window hoping you'd stop by. Don't tell me about investments. I already paid in full. Tears glistened in his eyes, but still, he didn't stand up to her. He didn't say, you're right, Mom. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He just sat there, torn between the life he had chosen and the woman who sat beside him. I walked toward the door and opened it wide. the night air rushing in, cool and fresh. The sound of crickets filled the silence, a reminder that the world outside was still moving, still alive, even as something inside my home was dying. "It's late," I said firmly. "You should go." Claire scoffed, standing so abruptly her chair nearly toppled. "Fine. If this is the kind of mother you are, then don't expect us to come crawling back when you realize your mistake." "I won't," I replied softly. Daniel rose slowly, his eyes wet, his lips trembling as though he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. He lingered in the doorway, torn between me and her, between love and fear. For a moment, I thought, hoped, that he might turn back, that he might step forward, hug me, say the words I needed to hear. But he didn't. He followed her into the night, his footsteps fading down the walk, leaving me standing in the doorway alone. I closed the door gently, the click echoing through the house like the final note of a song. The dining table still smelled of garlic and butter, the candles still flickered, the dishes sat half-eaten. But the celebration was gone. The warmth was gone. And yet for the first time in years, I felt a strange, aching relief. I wasn't prey anymore. I was free. The house felt unbearably quiet after the door closed. I leaned against it, my hand still resting on the cool, would as though I could somehow hold back the emptiness pressing in from the other side. My chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven breaths, and for a long moment, I let the silence wash over me. The dining room still looked like a celebration. Candles flickering, glasses half full, plates piled with expensive food I couldn't taste anymore. But the truth lay scattered all around. The crumpled napkin stained with vodka, the folder of debts, the tension still hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath me, and let my eyes wander over the remnants of the evening. I had dreamed of a night filled with laughter, of being cherished, of finally feeling seen. Instead, I had witnessed the ugliest truth of all, that love could be twisted, bent, used as a weapon. My hands trembled as I gathered the papers into a neat pile. Each page was filled with numbers that weren't mine, consequences that weren't mine, but guilt had tried to plant them in my lap like poisoned seeds. I pressed the stack flat, then carried it to the fireplace. Without hesitating, I struck a match, the sulfur sharp in the air, and set the corner aflame. The fire caught quickly, orange tongues devouring ink and paper, turning their demands into ash. I watched every page curl and blacken, the bold numbers fading into nothing. And with every crackle of burning debt, I felt a piece of the weight lift off my chest. But when the last ember died, the silence returned, heavier than before. I walked back to the table and sat again, my hands folded, staring at the chair where Daniel had sat. I could still see his face, the boy I raised, the man he had become, torn between me and the woman he chose. The tears came then, slow and hot, spilling down my cheeks. I let them fall unashamed, because beneath the strength, beneath the resolve, I was still a mother. And no matter what he had said, no matter what he had asked for, he was still my son. That was the cruelest part. "Why, Daniel?" I whispered into the empty room. "Why couldn't you stand up for me just once?" The clock ticked on, steady and merciless, as though mocking my question. I poured myself a small glass of wine, the same expensive bottle they had brought, and raised it alone. The taste was bitter, nothing like the sweetness I had imagined earlier in the night. I sipped anyway, letting the sting remind me of reality. For the first time in years, I wasn't clinging to hope that they would change, that they would suddenly become the family I longed for. Tonight had stripped away the illusions. What was left was painful, but it was real. The phone sat on the counter, silent. I thought about calling a friend, but the truth was, I hadn't let many people into my life. My world had revolved around waiting for Daniel, waiting for his calls, his visits, his love. And now I realized that waiting had cost me years I couldn't get back. I walked into my bedroom and looked at the envelope still resting on the nightstand. The check, the proof of my unexpected fortune. I had thought it would fix everything. Instead, it had revealed everything. I lay down on the bed, the ceiling fan turning slowly above me, shadows stretching across the walls. My body ached with exhaustion, but my mind wouldn't rest. I kept hearing Claire's voice. You'll regret this when you're alone. Maybe she was right. Maybe loneliness was waiting for me. But as I closed my eyes, I realized something else too. Loneliness might be painful, but it was better than being surrounded by people who only pretended to love me. For once, I chose peace over pretense. And that choice, though it hurt, felt like the beginning of something new. The next morning, the sun streamed in through the thin curtains, golden light spilling across the floor like a quiet reminder that life goes on, no matter how broken you feel inside. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, my hands wrapped around the warmth, letting it anchor me. The house was silent but not heavy. For the first time, the silence felt like mine. I thought about Daniel, his pleading eyes, his trembling voice, his silence when I needed him most. And I thought about Claire, her sharp words, her cruelty, the way she looked at me as if I were nothing more than a means to an end. The pain of last night was still raw, but beneath it was something else. A clarity. I had spent so many years waiting for their love, bending myself into shapes just to earn scraps of affection. I had told myself that one day they would see me, truly see me, and value the sacrifices I had made. But last night proved something I had been too afraid to admit. Some people will never change, and no amount of love, money, or sacrifice will ever be enough for them. My coffee grew cold as I stared out the window at the little garden I had nurtured for decades. The roses glistened with morning dew, their petals opening to the light. They bloomed without asking for anything in return, without manipulation, without conditions. They reminded me that love, true love, is freely given, not demanded, not bought, not weaponized. I stood and walked to the small safe tucked in the corner of my bedroom. Inside was the check, the symbol of everything that had gone wrong, but also everything that could go right. I held it in my hands, the paper crisp and full of promise. For the first time, I didn't think of Daniel or Claire. I thought of me. There were places I had always dreamed of, coastal towns where the sea whispered against the rocks, quiet villages in Ireland with green hills and old stone cottages, places where no one knew me as just someone's mother. I thought of books I had never read, classes I had never taken, friends I had never made because I had spent so much of my life waiting. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to beg for crumbs of love. What I needed was to live. The phone rang that afternoon. Daniel. My heart leapt before I could stop it. Old habits dying hard. I let it ring. I let it fall silent. For once, I didn't rush to answer, didn't bend myself to fit his needs. Maybe one day he would call out of love, not obligation or need. Until then, I had nothing more to give. That night, I booked a ticket. One way. The first step in a journey that belonged entirely to me. As I packed my bag, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I had money, but because I had finally chosen myself. The years ahead might be uncertain, and maybe I would be alone at times, but I would be free. And freedom, I realized, was worth more than any fortune. I closed my suitcase, turned off the lights, and whispered into the quiet. This time, I'm living for me. And with that, I walked into a future built not on guilt, not on manipulation, but on dignity, strength, and the simple, unshakable truth. Love should never come with a price tag.